Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 4th, 2025. We're here this afternoon for a work session regarding our climate smart and future ready environmental justice impact assessment. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me is my fellow Commissioner, Commissioner John Kafalis, and we have Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally on the phone this afternoon. We also have our County Manager, Lorinda Volker, with us, and Heidi Pruis is here. She is our Sustainability and Climate Manager. And Heidi, I'll let you kick us off and introduce our guests, and we'll get going.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate your attention today to hear this very exciting roll-up of some work that's been done through 2024 that will support our climate action future ready action teams, climate smart future ready action teams. I have with me today to do all the presenting and answer all the questions so I don't have to do anything, Dr. David Barajas from CSU, and he'll introduce himself and give the presentation to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So I'm a professor at Colorado State University in environmental epidemiology, and I have my colleague here, Emily Morales, that also supported this work. So what I will be introducing to you is a big overview of the environmental justice impact assessment. And I will bring you to the idea of where this started from and how we find the results that we have found and what is the report actually summarize. And then, as you know, the Climate Smart Future Ready Plan aims to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions across the county. So this is just a snapshot of a variety of information the plan already covers. There is even a dashboard that summarizes many of this information, but it gives us a sense of that where the main emissions are coming from. So in this case, different type of fuels, electricity, natural gas, on-road gasoline, diesel. But in the dashboard, you actually can visualize different sectors of the economy that contributes and the geography of those emissions. But the idea of this plan is identify what kind of strategies we can implement at the county level to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. So what you have here is the top 7 strategies. So in general, we have the plan have identified more strategies as these 7 strategies. So and the general idea in this case is to really identify which ones will be able to provide a major or maximum reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So what you have here between those 7, these are the ones that we included in the assessment for your reference. So we have one that is implemented energy efficiency rules. In this case, are more building codes to really improve buildings, households, to reduce the consumptions of energy and be more efficient. Others are focusing more on improving resources, providing resources that...
Madam Chair. Oh, there we go. I was just noticing on the screen it wasn't showing the slide presentation, but it looks like we've corrected that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
So another example, the second intervention or strategy in this case is more centered in providing incentives, education, and training to the workforce, so we can really reduce the use of energy, the consumption. Solar and wind power, the development of course, implementation of infrastructure, solar panels and wind farms, but also the grid, strengthen the grid that exists across the county to really bring that energy to different locations. Increase electromobility, that not only includes electric cars, but also electric buses, e-bikes, e-scooters. Improve public transportation. So here is not only improve the quantity, but also the quality of the service and connect not only inside of the towns, but also across the county. Better walking and walking paths. This is to promote active transportation. Bicycles, pedestrians, wheelchairs that can move safely across our streets and roads. And bringing parks, stores closer. So this aims more to center the idea of the 15 minutes community or 10-minute community. So provide those destinations closer to the origin of, for the people lives. So we can reduce the distances and then shift that mobility to more active mobility and reduce the emissions related to more motorized transport. So these are the top 7 strategies that we identified to be included in the analysis. So the general idea here was to really add the environmental justice lens. So this sounds like a fantastic strategy to reduce or start to impact the greenhouse gas emissions, but what will be the impact in the environmental justice? Or those will increase the injustices or reduce those injustices? How we can identify those, how we can maximize the benefits or minimize the risks. For that reason, what we implemented is an environmental justice impact assessment. This aims to be a systematic approach, so include these 7 steps, and the general idea is to evaluate what are those strategies, what are the evidence that support those strategies, what are the factors related to environmental justice that will be impact, that could be increase or reduce the injustices, and also integrate the community feedback. In this process, merge that feedback with the analysis and generate recommendations. So overall aim of this process is generate recommendations to maximize the benefits and minimize any risk, always with the lens of environmental justice. Something important to share with you is that we have the opportunity to present this exercise or this work to the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Board. So, and what we plan in this case is to start to doing this before we start in the process, because we wanted to hear if the advisory board thought that this was a beneficial process before to start doing all the exercise. And then we also presented what was the plan. So what will be included, what we wanted or intended to do, to really hear the feedback. Is that something that you feel like is beneficial, but also where in the process your feedback will be more beneficial to really have a better outcome of all this process. So we met with them before we started the project. We met them during the community engagement. So we present the community engagement plan, we receive feedback, and we met with them at the end of last year when we already have the recommendations, to present with them, to hear about feedback and integrate any feedback that they have. So overall, we went through the process to ensure we leverage any connections, any perceptions, any needs that the community, the advisory board had. So these were integrated in addition to the community engagement that we were planning. So now I want to center in some of the steps of the assessment, so you have clarity of the process and so have better interpretation of the results. So the community engagement, in this case, I want to explain you what we did. So we started the community engagement at the beginning of September, finalized it at mid-October. These were 6 weeks of community engagement. So this included workshops in person in Fort Collins, Loveland, and Estes Park. We also have workshops online, all in English and Spanish. We also develop an online survey in English and Spanish and tabling events that happen also in Fort Collins, Estes Park, and Loveland. In this map, what you see here is how we identify those areas. So the priority of the community engagement was not to cover or represent everyone in the county. The aim in this community engagement process was to really hear from those that are more disproportionately impacted. So how we design those in-person events were based on Colorado EnviroScreen. This is a state-wide tool that identifies and defines disproportionate impact in communities and based on the definition of community impacts of environmental justice. So what you see in this map is that the highest scores, so the darkest areas, are the areas that are expected to have more environmental injustices in the county. So we prioritize those areas to be the areas where we invest in the in-person community engagement. In the next slide, what we have is just a sample of the community engagement material we use and photos of the in-person sessions. We can talk more about those sessions if you have any questions, but give you a sense of what we have during that period. Overall, in the next slide, overall what we have is we hear from around 380 persons across the county, mainly through the online survey. We hear most of those feedback, but you can see in this graph also the distribution of those that respond in English and those versus those that respond in Spanish. In the workshops also, and the tabling events were mostly in English. So in the next slide, what we have is the results of what we heard. So you have here the 7 strategies. And this is the ranking. This is what actually community members prioritize. And the question in this case was, if you have these 7 strategies, which one you think will be the benefit the most to you, your community, or the community you represent? So, and they rank in that way. So they have only these 7 options. It's not everything that the county is doing, but only these 7 options to choose. And something important to highlight is the priority was centered in improvements of public transportation. So this is one of the points that we hear more support or more need, followed by given resources to use less energy at work and home. That means incentives, education to the public, and training to the workforce. So this is more like a combined package. After that, we have developed more solar and wind energy or power, followed by the active mobility, walking and wheeling paths, then the 15-minute city approach or urban approach, and bringing more stores and parks closer to home. And the final 2 were make rules to use less energy in the buildings, such as building codes. And the last one was increase electromobility. So that was very surprising for us, because if you hear in the media, there are a lot of attention on electromobility and less attention to other topics. But even though that this is the case, the community is still prioritizing more the other strategies. So this is the result in terms of the ranking of the 7 from the community members. So the next slide, what we have is the same 7 strategies with the ranking, but I wanted to bring the distinction between those that speak English versus those that speak Spanish. So you see in the top a nuance in the change in the ranking in the top 3. They're still in the top 3, but the only change is the order of the top 3. So Spanish speaker community members prioritizes first provide more resources to use less energy at home and work. And that means incentives, education, and training to the workforce. But still, the ranking is pretty similar. So in the next slide, what we have is the change between concerns and opportunities across the 3 different communities that we deploy the community engagement. So you see here Fort Collins, Loveland, and Estes Park, and the key concerns. Fort Collins more centering equity and cost of adoption of those strategies. Loveland more concerned of the disruption that those will have in the community, and Estes Park in terms of affordability and reflecting the community needs. In terms of opportunity, what we heard in the different communities, Fort Collins more taking advantage of education and training for people, business, and traders. In Loveland, leverage community organizations that already exist and programs that already exist. And in Estes Parks, really center the interventions to community-owned renewable energy projects and plans.
Can I interrupt you, Dr.?
For sure.
Rojas? I have a question about the education and training. Are you talking about kind of education and training so that people could maybe, and Michael Truitt is in the house, and he's done a lot of this work, but sort of retrofitting houses for more energy efficiency, that kind of work? Is that what the kind of training you're talking about?
Excellent question. So education will be more involved to be aware of what is the issue, that the possibility that we can improve not only our homes, but also our behaviors outside home and even at work. So there are opportunities to educate and provide this information to people so they're able to make the choices that will be the more impactful for the emissions. In terms of the training, they were more referring to training that workforce that will provide the services. If you ask someone to improve their air condition at home, or you want to install a heat pump, not everyone knows how to install a heat pump. So training to those specific areas will be very beneficial, so we have access to those technicians that provide those services that will be offer us the option to have a heat pump instead of air conditioning.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry to call you out, Michael, but I'm going to call you out one more time because I know that Michael Michael Truitt's in the audience for those listening online. Michael's talked to me before about some of the work that he's done in mobile home parks, where he says that because a lot of the folks, and Michael also has worked with the climate program too, but because he's trained a lot of, when he goes into mobile home parks and trains people, it's not that hard because there's a lot of people who he finds at least, and tell me if I'm wrong, that have skills to be able to do this work. So if it's creating more energy efficiency in their homes, it's not a huge effort to train them to do that. And then, Michael, will you respond to that if you don't mind, since you're sitting here?
Yeah, my name's Michael Truitt, and I'm with Carbon Neutral Group. I'm also on the Climate Action Group here in Larimer County. The bulk of the weatherization work that's done in mobile home parks these days is done by the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is federally funded. And under the Inflation Reduction Act, they saw a quadrupling of their funding. They do historically 80 to 100 energy retrofit projects on mobile homes per year. I think they were pushing 150 to 200. The big bottleneck was staffing. Plenty of folks waiting on a waiting list to have their mobile homes upgraded. And they have a short list of really effective upgrades that they do for the mobile homes. 50% of the mobile homes that are currently occupied in Larimer County and Boulder County, for the most part, were built before 1974, before the HUD standards, the building codes went into effect for mobile homes. So, we kind of use the phrase tin can for those mobile homes that were built before 1974. And of course, the ones that were built after 74 can use a lot of work too. But anyway, the Weatherization Assistance Program does a pretty good job of working on that effort. Back to the comments that Doctor made regarding HVAC related training, heat pumps and air conditioning. We have a long way to go in terms of getting the industry up to speed. Right now on the Climate Action Committee, we're working trying to form collaborative efforts in terms of resources and funding with the utilities. Yeah, workforce development. So, PRPA here locally and Excel Energy, they have some, efforts and some accomplishments. Workforce training, Larimer County workforce training with Adam Crow. We're working on some, trying to bring resources together. Front Range Community College, has a good HVAC program, but I would say currently underutilized. The hardest thing to do is get qualified instructors. You get paid $3,000 a semester to teach a night course, and so you're showing up 2-3 nights a week. Right now, the laboratory is the classes are all night classes, and we're only putting about 14 people a semester through the program. Really like to see if we can grow the funding for HVAC instructors at Front Range, and also, really put that lab to better use, or to just expand the current use. We could have a morning shift in the lab, one group in the lab, one group in the, in the lecture, and then switch in the afternoons. then bring in the night classes and the Saturday classes, we could probably triple if we had more funding for instructors, could probably triple the throughput per semester, get it up to the, 45 or 50 students. Anyway,
Yeah,
there's a
thank
lot
you.
going on there. We've got a long way to go.
I appreciate that. That's helpful to kind of get the picture of,
I can tell you
Right.
that I test or commission HVAC systems for a living, and about half the systems I test fail. They're underperforming by about, between 20 and 30%, sometimes as much as 50%, due to errors and omissions made during the installation process. So we do have a lot of systems that are being installed, but not installed well.
great.
And then the other last issue we have is about 2/3 of the replacements in terms of HVAC equipment happen outside the permit process. About 2/3 of the time, no one pulls a
Let our
permit.
building people know about that.
I know. And so there's a lot of ground to cover there, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, thanks. We can move on unless you have any questions. Commissioner, do you have questions? Okay. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions? I guess not. We'll let you go ahead, Dr. Rhodes.
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and feel free to stop me in the process. I have a couple slides more, but yeah, it's interesting to have this conversation and context. So, in the next slide, what we have is the impact assessment process more. So the impact assessment process, and probably you will see these additional slides here. So I just wanted to add what is the purpose of this step is to identify risk and benefits. So compare the strategies, rank those strategies, integrate the community engagement, identify the geographical needs, and prioritize the strategies. So I'm probably you have this slide in front of you. So this slide tries to identify, summarize what are some of the indicators we use in this specific step. So what identifies different characteristics of the 7 strategies. And in the next slide, what you have is for each of those indicators, we rank or grade those indicators for the potential to have an impact in each of those characteristics. We combine that grade in a score in the next slide, and then what we see is that we combine those indicators in groups. So those that have the potential to provide benefits, those that have the potential to provide risk or intended consequences, and those that have more center in the equity or justice dimension. So, and it's probably what you have in front of you in the slide. In the next slide, what we have is that 3 groups or 3 buckets. So we group those indicators of each individual strategy in equity, more center, benefit, more center, more risk center. The final purpose is to provide a ranking, so we are able to compare the 7 strategies in a fair and systematic approach. So to do that, we include the community engagement feedback in this process to really weight that 3 groups of indicators of information for each strategy. With evidence and expert judgment, we create this kind of balance of weightings. And you say the score weights more in the equity because what we heard during the community engagement is that we need more perception, more intention in terms of this kind of equity-driven strategies. And because this is something that could change the results, the prioritization process, we also did some sensitivity analysis. Is that the weighting here valid or not? If we change the assumptions, we'll have the same results or not. So in the next slide, what you will see are the 7 strategies. So, and the different buckets. So what you see here is a histogram. So those bars, and the first bars are those results of the analysis from the scores 0 to 5, being 5 those that are performing better in terms of the benefit in this case. And what you see here is the comparison of those 7 strategies. So using the same system, public transportation is showing with more benefits. In the next slide, we have bars showing the risks. So in this case, what you see here is that those more to the right side, the higher or the taller of the bars, are those that are expected to provide more unintended consequences. And in the next slide, the third set of bars are those that are related with equity. So, and you see again, they're leaning towards. So the idea is to really compare those 7 strategies with the same approach. And in this next slide, what you will see is the 3 buckets combined in one single score. Again, going from 0 to 5. So taller bars means that they are performing better, and that, in other words, can be prioritized in terms of the implementation process. This is the main analysis. So give it a sense that what we have here is some kind of assumptions in terms of the weighting. And the next bar, besides in the right side of the first main analysis, is what if we intentionally add more weight on the equity perspective? That will change the results. Not. The trend is very similar. The size of the bar changed, but the trend is still similar. That means the prioritization keep the same. What if we instead increase the benefits? If we prioritize in the benefits, that will change the rank, and didn't change the rank. What if we intentionally change and weight more in terms of the risks? We are more concerned about the risks. Change the ranking, did not change the ranking. What if we modify multiple 2 of those indicators at a time? And the last bar is what if we repeat this analysis 100 times with any range of values inside of those change the analysis, and we didn't identify any change. In other words, the ranking is very robust, even with the different assumptions of what is more important. So the ranking keep there. So give us the certainty that that kind of prioritization process, that starting with public transportation and ending with electromobility, will be a good path for us to suggest the implementation of those strategies. Very important in this next slide is that doesn't mean that we need to do one versus another thing. So there is, all the strategies are connected. So this graph wanted to show the interconnectedness of those strategies. So public transportation is connected with active transportation, electromobility, with the 15-minute city, with the renewable energies. So those cannot be moved away of the other. So there is a connection there that should be taken into account through the implementation process. The next slide is centered more in the geographical aspect of where to implement first those strategies. So the previous slides were speaking about which of the 7 we should be starting thinking to implement first. Now we're speaking about where in the county there is a priority. So this geographical definition is based off the disproportionate impacted communities. There is this definition from the state Colorado statute that define the disproportionate impacted community by certain definitions. So the map that you see here in the right side, you have definitions of the different colors. Probably it's too small for you to see, but the general idea is that the state of Colorado defines disproportionate impacted communities by if they're mobile home communities, or if at census block group level, more than 40% of the population lives below 200% of the poverty level. That is one of the definitions. More than 40% of the people is people of color. More than 50% of people living within that census block group spend more than 30% of the income on housing. If there is more than 20% of the people living with linguistic isolation, if Colorado VAR screen score is higher than 80 on the score, or if also the environmental justice 40 tool from the federal mapping exercise define that geography of a census tract as a disproportionate impact community. Any of those options account as a definition of disproportionately impacted community for the state of Colorado. And in the county, what we identified as 59 census block groups actually enter below that definition. So, and just to clarify, this is the most recent version of the definition and the most recent version of the tool. And this was launched at the end of last year. So, on end of November, we have the new Colorado Environmental Screen and then the implication of the new definitions. So, this is pretty new in case you have never seen this type of mapping. So that represents around 20% of the population living in the county. That is below that definition of disproportionately impacted community from the state of Colorado. And this also helps us to identify where those 7 strategies could be of the more need or have the maximizing the impact. So give us a sense of areas of priority for us to start thinking, implementing in those geographies. In this next slide, what you see is, again, the map of the county with 2 areas highlighted only. These are the areas highlighted by Colorado Environmental Screen. So the difference in between Colorado Environmental Screen definitions and the purely definition of the state of Colorado disproportionately impacted community is that Colorado Environmental Screen is way more restrictive. To arrive to that definition, it uses 35 indicators to take into account not only the environment, the social condition, and the health condition of that community to really arrive to that definition. And for the county, there's 2 census block groups that arrive to that definition. Very restrictive definition, but still 2 areas in the county are below that. And in the next slide, probably I make a zoom of those areas. Northern Fort Collins and more in the center of Loveland. Those 2 census block groups are the ones that actually have the definition disproportionately impacting community with a very restrictive set of components of that definition. What we use this is to really highlight where the high priority areas. I know that I presented in the previous slide 59 areas that you can start. 59, it's a lot. So, but if you need to start geographically speaking in somewhere, these are the 2 areas that probably will be the first areas to start implementing those strategies. Again, doesn't mean that the 59 are not relevant, but if you need to start, that will be important. So the next set of slides are centered in the recommendations. Again, the recommendations aim to maximize the benefits. That means improve environmental justice through those strategies and minimize risk. That is really try to move away of the unintended consequences. What we have here is like a scorecards. In the top of the scorecard, you have the strategy, the rank between the 7 strategies, the level of priority, and the time frame that we can use. We have also key benefits, key risks, and in the bottom we have equity concerns and implementation steps. We have more information in the report, but this is just for summarize as a quick overview of those strategies. And again, probably the most important here to read is to go to the equity considerations to really have the nuances that how we can really maximize that strategy with the environmental justice lens and minimize unintended consequences and improve the benefits. We have the same scorecards for each of the strategies, and the following slides are centered in the other strategies. I want to allow some time for questions, but here again, the second ranking. If you and give you an example of this energy efficiency and incentives, that incentives, education, and training is here below this strategy. If we go to the equity considerations, so consider the low-income households access to those incentives, to those education, and to that training. Consider renter participation in opportunities. Many of the incentives are centered for those that are homeowners and often forgets about the renters. So language accessible programs that so anyone could have the opportunity to access and be informed about those opportunities, and equal distribution of the benefits. So again, that means prioritizing the benefits for those that need it the most, then jump to the next bucket. The next scorecard centered the 50-minute community, proximity to destinations. I will read everything here, but give us a sense of where we are providing the summary recommendations for each of those strategies. The next one is centered in active transportation, wheeling and walking paths. Something important here is the accessibility. Often we center in walking and cycling. And that could left out those that are in wheelchairs. So normally we use walking and wheeling, so that allow this development of active transportation infrastructure that things in the size and the width of the sidewalks, so the width of the bike lanes, the intersections, that really there exist ramps. So it's not only add quantity, but also quality of that infrastructure and connectivity to that infrastructure. The next one, renewable energy expansion. Again, opportunities here in terms of really share those benefits and distribute those benefits across the county. And include the community engagement process in that implementation. Building energy standards is the next one. And as I mentioned before, this is in the ranking of the prioritization from the analysis and the community engagement. And the last one, electromobility. Again, I will not repeat everything or read everything that is inside of these individual cards. We also have in the report, in the appendix, checklists that help us to really track many of those, because we also develop indicators. So, and we recommend more or less time frames that they're very general and allowed to be adapted by the Climate Smart Future Ready team, but to give a sense of how you can use this report and these findings in the future and track and see there's a progression of changes in what we are mentioning to take into account. Almost the final slide is just a summary page at the beginning of the report that tried to, again, highlight what are the priority areas, what are the priority strategies, and what we identified or found during the community engagement. And I will stop here and then allow for questions for you, Saidan. Sorry if
No,
took so much
no, that
time.
was wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Rojas. Commissioner Cavalos, any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
David, Dr. Ross. Well, look, just to go back to the beginning, I'm curious with regard to the EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Board input. Can you share a couple of key highlights, the input that you received from those folks that maybe caused you to adjust the scope or some of the parameters of your work?
And-
Maybe a couple of really important ones?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So something that we feel very beneficial in the process were during the community engagement to present the community engagement plan to really identify how we really can approach the community members that they feel they represent or they can left out in common community engagement processes. So really make these in locations where they feel comfortable to attending, when we have in-persons that can be approachable by public transportation, not only by car. So really design the in-person activities in a way that we can allow them to attract. So, and to give you some examples, like in Fort Collins, we did the in-person workshop in a taqueria. So we allow the place to be a comfortable place for people to attend that place, to feel welcome to the place. In Loveland, we use a venue that is a laser tag. So we add benefits to the kids so they can play. We allow the kids to be using the same time. Sometimes parents is very difficult to attend those meetings because you don't bring kids sometimes to those venues. So we really redesign the way to make it more attractive to them, to allow them to feel invited and easy. So something important also was at the beginning of the process that I was very curious to ask them, do you think this exercise or this process is important and beneficial? I think for me that through all the feedback of the different sessions we have with them was the most important, because we can plan to do a lot of analysis, assessment, and recommendations. But if the community don't feel like this is an important lens, probably it's a pointless use of resources and time to really execute. So they saw the relevance and the importance to add this layer of environmental justice and equity of the strategies. And the strategies are already identified. So we do not create a new strategy for the climate mitigation. We just analyze the strategies that are already there. So this understanding that in many of the cases, the use of the advisory board, the equity, diversity, and inclusion, is to present what is already done. And never they're asking them if you agree with this process. So I think this changing mentality, like, probably will be asking in them before we execute this kind of exercise, time, resources in these type of projects, if they think this is a valuable exercise or not. Instead, just arriving and present a result, we did that. So I think my sense is that that is a great starting point, and we open to them to then provide feedback of where exactly in the process they want to be involved. So again, we try to be with them since the beginning.
May I do a quick follow-up, then
Yes, of
perhaps it's
course.
best to alternate with all three of
Sure.
us. I think I probably have more than a few questions, but do what's most important. My follow-up is, thank you for sharing what you shared. Can you give an example where perhaps input from the EDI board and other groups maybe helped you to reframe a question? They helped you to get some insights, and maybe, my experience, which is very limited, is when you talk about these things to folks that are living paycheck to paycheck, the bottom line is an important incentive or benefit. I'm wondering if they helped you to reframe at least one of the questions. Thank you, sir.
Excellent point, an excellent question. And if you see the original strategies, the name of the strategies are very far from what we use in the community engagement. So we don't use the same wording. When I say even 15-minute city, that is a very complicated, something that can have many interpretations. So what we use in this case is build parks and supermarkets closer to home.
That's a good point.
So to really make the case that what this intention here is to improve proximity to those destinations. And even someone during the community engagement say, why we don't say build more houses closer to parks or supermarkets? And this is the type of conversation they feel like, yes, that will be a nice idea. But if you come to say we want to reduce the distances and create this 10 or 15-minute community, it will be very challenging for everyone to understand. So, and we shift all the names in the ways that, well, what we mean here is incentives. What we mean here is walking or willing. So to really change the conversation in a way that you can see more close to reality daily life activities.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. We know in our business worlds, all of us, whatever your business is, that when we use that lingo, we distance people, and so I appreciate that. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions from you?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry for the echo there. First, I want to thank you, Doctor. I've listened on, as the Commissioner Liaison, listened to that presentation to the EDI board and was so fascinated just listening to an interaction. I just really appreciate your engagement there. My question, well, first off, just fantastic work. This is just really great work, and we're so grateful you're partnering with Heidi in our county. But my curiosity is, we also have a lot of rural folks, unincorporated areas versus urban. And we have a lot of folks, people of color and other folks who are working in some of those mountain rural areas or are connected to industries like agricultural stuff that is not in an urban center. and I'm wondering how that worked, integrated into this work to kind of look at that as a different lens with folks not always living in an urban center. Just curious. I hope my answer was clear. Forgive me if it's not.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the question. I think this is a fantastic point, and we intentionally include rural definitions in our analysis. And just an example in the slide that I'm presenting here, the 15-minute community is centered often in the idea of urban settings. But the equity considerations, if you read, there's one that says rural community needs. So these need to adapt to that reality. So, and through the document, we have mentioned to what, in the perspective of a rural community, this intervention or this strategy should be taken into account. Because we do not need to forget that it's not only about quantity of people, is that everyone should be taken into account, even if you live in a very low density area. Another example have here electromobility, so the rural community access to electric community, to stations to charge. So this is something also to take into account. So through the document, we have references to the rural community perspective and how to maximize those benefits and eliminate or minimize unintended consequences for that bias that those that we live in the cities tend to have. Excellent question, and thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you have any other questions or follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your answer. And maybe I haven't had a chance to look, and I apologize. I'm not able to join you all today because I'm still dealing with my fractured arm. But I'm curious, as we go forward, is there, and maybe you have shared this and I didn't catch it, recommendations to how to connect or engage or address some of those urban-rural divides with this kind of work?
So and thank you for the question. Now I'm wondering if there's we have a specific table to really clarify those recommendations. But if not, we can certainly create a table that lists specific recommendations on better summarize the recommendations for rural settings. So we have a large variety of recommendations there, but we can summarize that in a table that will make easier for that consideration.
Mm-hmm. And I would just offer that the point of this exercise was to assist our existing action teams in making these connections, exactly this point around how do we improve the work that we're doing in our action teams to include the equity lens. So the action teams are approaching their work very differently. It's not like a one-size-fits-all, this is how you can create an equity lens or an urban-rural connection or any of these other connections across the board in our entire Climate Smart Future Ready effort. It really will be incumbent on the action team champions to digest this work and bring it back to their teams to see how it is that they can fold in, which is one of the reasons why Mike Truitt is here as the champion for instance, the energy efficiency and electrification team. So it's a great point. I think there's a continued effort to try to understand how to not make urban solutions always fit into an urban situation, and where are those differences. And so it's really exciting, especially some of the comments that came out of Estes Park, because of this more rural community who participated in this effort. Yeah, would you?
Good day, everyone. For those that didn't hear my introductions at the beginning, I'm Emily Morales with Imoza Community Planning, and I supported the engagement component of this effort. One other very unique perspective that came out of Estes Park, and it could be something that I think can be a good consideration to have for just any other rural community across the county, is that they have a lot of seasonality, right? Like, I mean, Estes being such a touristic spot, they have their population changes drastically from the high touristic season versus when it isn't so just considering like transportation needs, energy needs, and all these different needs at different times of the year when their population changes so drastically. So keeping that in mind even for other rural towns that may have those changes in population, it was a great recommendation that we received from the Estes community.
Yeah, I think, and Commissioner, I'm just going to jump in for a second, and then you can ask more questions if you have some, but I think about the transportation piece. So since public transportation was one of the identified needs that could help people, which I was glad to see because that's my space. And I think about that because it doesn't make sense necessarily always in rural areas to have robust public transportation because there's not the ridership. But there needs to be something. And so how do we move people maybe from these rural areas onto the more urban systems to get to work or their doctors or whatever? I mean, that's something that we are trying to investigate, whether that looks like these kind of smaller commuter buses that run less frequently or buses that are aimed at like the senior population. I think that there is a lot of and we have some new companies coming in that are willing to move in that space. And so how do we move people from rural areas to urban areas because they need those urban services? I mean, even if you live in an rural area, you still need groceries, you still need to go to the doctor, you still need to go to work, and those likely aren't in the areas that you're living. And so what makes sense in that space, and I think we're exploring that at the regional level at the MPO, and then I think we've had a lot of conversations within the commissioners about what that might look like for communities like Wellington who feel more isolated and things like that. So I think that to be continued, but for me, this is really great work to have that, to, that people are to see what people are prioritizing, to see how we can make that work at a county setting. I think it's great, obviously, for the groups that we have that are working on climate, but for me as a person who, kind of plans some of these things, it's also really great information to have, so. Commissioner, any questions before I turn it back over to Commissioner Kafalis?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Madam Chair. And again, really glad for the Estes engagement. As you know, I'm up there a lot. I've been up there doing some in-depth work the last couple of weeks. And, this conversation reminded me what we keep talking about. It has come up several times in our discussions, they call them Valley Days. And these, because of in the summertime where they can't get into the store because of the lines and they don't have access to all the kinds of services, or Home Depot's not up there, et cetera, whatever, that they call them Valley Days, and they try to coordinate to help them get down and shop and buy groceries. And I will see them around my neighborhood grocery stores, people I know that live in Estes, and they do know where the charging stations are if they come down and where they're going to park and charge, so they drive back up. And I just learned about an app myself, so I know where the closer charging station and free ones are. So I think I'm growing and learning in that space as well. And so I just wanted to kind of put a name on that. They call them Valley Days. And I think this is really a great conversation and important points, and I just want to thank you all for the work that you've done in the partnership. It's just extremely valuable, and for me, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to listen in and watch online today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kafalis, any further questions?
Just a little bit as we approach 2:30. Well, first of all, I want to reinforce the comments that Commissioner Shattuck McNally raised about making sure we're very mindful of rural access issues in this urban-rural divide. I think that also relates to, the perceptions of climate change and how we frame that are very different in the rural areas than they are in the urban areas. So I think that's important. How do we speak the language such that people can embrace that these are real issues, and certain framing that you might do in Fort Collins, it might be different if you're doing it in these other places. And it's great that you're looking at Estes Park. I just want to make sure and Heidi knows this, and I think you folks know this, there's a lot of communities that are unincorporated, like LaPorte, like Livermore, like Red Feather Lakes, Virginia Dale. I mean, these places that are out in the boonies, and so we need to be mindful of that. And another point I wanted to make on this urban-rural divide issue, and I appreciate that our colleague brought this up, and that is, there are the issues the way you have them, and then they're connected to other issues. So, for example, one of the access issues up in places like Red Feather Lakes or Livermore, those 6 or so, I think in our comprehensive plan, that's area 6 or something, that ties into healthcare access, for example. And most people, if they need to go see a primary care person, they have to come into town. So how do we create more options for them to come into town, or how do we get rural health care, appropriate rural health care, maybe closer, where they may not be able to walk there, but it's closer and there's less vehicle miles traveled. So I think that's really important, and I think you've answered one of my big takeaway questions, and that is, well, this is all well and good. Everybody likes to do research, so now what? But it sounds like the stuff that's in the report is going to go to the various teams, and then they're going to kind of think of ways to put it into action. Is that right, Heidi?
That is correct. And it won't just be those top 7 action teams that were highlighted in this report. It will be the suite of the 19 strategies that are in the Climate Smart Future Ready plan that will take a look at this and see where they can incorporate their own actions to meet some of these recommendations.
Great. And Madam Chair, just one last, pretty quick, and then you can have the rest of the time, or if our esteemed county manager has wisdom for us. And that is, I noticed in the energy reduction side of things, in none of this did I see water reduction. And of course, that's not directly energy reduction, but the less water the more you use water wisely, it reduces your bills. And also, if you have gas, hot water heater. So I'm wondering why there's no mention of education training as it relates to energy, water conservation, water efficiency, all the stuff that the city does to incentivize that, more efficient toilets, all of that. Any comments there, colleagues? And then I'm done. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Well, the simplest answer is because there had to be a limited scope for the amount of time that we had and the amount of effort that we had. But the second piece of that is the request was to specifically link together that EnviroScreen information, the disproportionately impacted communities, with the greenhouse gas inventories, which is the hard and fast numbers that we're looking for. Again, the water team will receive this information, and hopefully they can incorporate the bits and pieces that, of course, would be related to the energy use or the uses that go in that community. Oh, time, Commissioner, is only time. We don't have enough time.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your work. It was really interesting. I'm anxious to dig in, further, because, one of the things I think about with the built environment is how do we do that better for the future, right? And so, it's once you build something, it's there. And so how do we get better at creating the 15-minute city? How do we get better at creating environments that are healthier for people? That piece is really, because not only have DI communities often been sort of isolated, socially isolated, or not have access to transportation, but they've also borne the brunt of pollution and roads being built near them and all the kind of toxins that come with that, that affect their health and air quality. And so, as we, I'm just glad we brought this up, because I think that we need to be more intentional about that work. And are there spaces in our land use code where we need to really, make sure that we don't have zoning that allows, mobile home parks near, or that, with our mobile home mobile home park prevention zones, that we're not citing any, industrial near there, or light industrial that's really not that light, or, and so I think that, doing this work sort of makes you more intentional about the full picture. I do think economics plays into it, because I think about the electrification with cars, and I think about, something else that came up that was like, more building codes. And I think code is good, and we have to really think about people's pocketbook when we do that work and make sure that we have that balance. So just a lot to chew on here, a lot to think about. Thank you very much. I'll give you the last word.
I think what I'll say is what impressed me the most when I saw this last week was this is data-based. This isn't about feelings or anecdotal evidence. Surveying community groups, they have to play a part, but these zones that you've identified, they're based on census data and state, requirements and those kind of things. And so I think if we can really impress upon folks that this isn't how someone feels, this is how it is. And what we do about it is up to us, and what we can afford to do and how fast we can afford to do it. That's what impressed me the most, is the methodology that got us to these recommendations. And the way that you did the scorecards makes it really easy to follow, and I think it'll be easy for the groups to use, to work with. So thank you for that. Thank you for condensing it from the report, which is fabulous, to these slides.
All right, well, we are out of time, so this conversation could go on for a long time, and it's been really, really enjoyable and informative, but it is 2:32, and we're going to adjourn now. Thank you.